this is not about me. It's because I became a mouthpiece for the group, because I refused to compromise my principles, because I refused to diverge from the teachings of Dr. John Henry Clark, from the teachings of Martin Delany, from the teachings of Harriet Tubman, from the teachings of Malcolm X, from the teachings of Dr. King. I refused from the teachings of Amos Wilson. I refused to compromise those principles that made me a doctor. I refused that. I refused it. I'm here because of, we had a march on January the 15th, which is Dr. King's birthday, his actual birthday, not the federal holiday, which is the 21st, which was President Barack Obama's inauguration. But his actual birthday was on the 15th. After talking to Dr. King's niece, she supported us in this protest, which started off at Delaware State University, where Empress and Pam Africa and Alton Maddox and a host of people from all over the country showed up in the rain. It was cold. And we rallied there against the police brutality and the other things, the ethnic cleansing of a historically black college. And then we went over and we marched from a drug rehabilitation center in Dover, Delaware, to the state capitol, where we had a speak out on the lynchings that are occurring in Delaware. A lot of people ask me, are they really lynchings? I mean, what do you mean by lynchings? Are these really lynchings? I'm like, yeah, lynchings. Neck on a tree, all of that, lynchings. Well, how could this be? This is, Obama's vice president. How could this go on in Delaware? Are you sure? And I often just tell people, look, I have a PhD in United States history with a concentration on the American South. I know a lynching when I see a lynching. All right? I did my PhD at Howard. I know a lynching. These are lynchings that are going on. And the state of Delaware is covering them up. Now, what's interesting about the state of Delaware, the Attorney General for the state of Delaware is none other than the Vice President of the United States' son, Joe Biden III, commonly known as Beau Biden, nickname. We went to him back in September with an affidavit of a young man who escaped a lynching. He was abducted, and we have videos right here, if you want one, of the abduction and him escaping it and how he escaped it. And then there was one in May, where a young man named Johnny Clark, who was my former barber, who was found hanging from a tree in the daylight around 6 o'clock in the evening, right before the sun went down. The police, it was not a proper investigation. I was at the park. I was going to this particular park twice a day, 5 times a week to this particular park. Some of us think it was aimed at me. We can't be sure because of what I was doing, my activism around saving the historically black colleges, the articles that I had written, which you can find online, and the investigation. I started this investigation back in February of 2012. So essentially what I want to start off with is it's important that we see that this assault against me is not an individual assault. What is happening to me? I'm now facing more than 2 years in prison, being prosecuted by the Vice President of the United States' son Mr. Beau Biden. I'm facing 2 years in prison for allegedly offensively touching an officer and resisting arrest. Although we had witnesses, videotapes, dozens of students. Now this happened March the 1st last year. I had to get rid of an attorney. I had to force a judge to recuse herself because she was related to some of the white supremacist professors on the campus at Delaware State. And it was like I was going into an ambush that I really wasn't prepared for because my time was in academia. I didn't understand the criminal process. So I had to learn criminal law real quick. Or if I hadn't, I probably would be finishing about 6 months of a 2-year sentence right now. That's the only reason why. I had to study law. I had to get myself in the law library and start studying rules and procedures and what do you do, what are you supposed to do, what lawyers are supposed to do, because I didn't have that background. So it's important, as I say this, people say, well, why are they doing this to you? You must have done something. Well, I did do something. I did. I exercised my First Amendment right by writing about how historically black colleges are being systematically taken away from black people. There's a 20-year plan to destroy the so-called what is left of the black middle class. When I say black middle class, I'm not talking about money per se. I'm talking about the abilities, skills, and resources and training. And it's been the black middle class throughout our tenure in this country that has allowed us to resist white supremacy. The training, not money, I'm talking the training, the mind, the thinking. And this is what is at stake. I didn't realize how big it was until I got a call after the article, How Black Colleges Are Turning White. I got a call from the White House advisor on HBCUs after meeting with him to come up to DC and sit down with him because he wanted to explain his side of what I wrote about in my article on how black colleges are turning white. I was unimpressed. I told him I wasn't impressed with him. As we left our meeting of over an hour, I asked him one final question. This is the guy who Obama put in place over the historically black colleges. He's now the president of Morehouse University. I asked him, I said, in your capacity as executive director of historically black colleges for the United States government, do you think in the next 10 years, the 102 historically black colleges that are still existing, do you believe that they will remain black in 10 years? He looked up at the sky, looked down at the ground, looked at me, put his hand like this, and walked out the room. That's how the thing ended. And from that time period, it was hell. I ended up getting a mysterious call, I'm going to call his name, from Tony Brown. Anybody y'all remember Tony Brown? Tony Brown Journal? He called me. And he said, young man, you probably don't know who I am. I said, yes, I do. I grew up listening to your shows on PBS. Before Tavis, it was you. You paved the way. I remember. They would talk about you at the shrines of the Black Madonna in Houston and Detroit and Atlanta, so I know about you. He said, well, you're in trouble. I said, trouble for what? He said, I see at the bottom of your article on how black colleges are turning white, I see that you ran President Obama's campaign in North Carolina. The New York Times did a special on you. I said, yeah, it's at the bottom of the article. He said, well, those are the ones who are after you. I'm like, are you serious? What are you talking about? He said, oh yeah, then you need to do the research on what happened to me in the 80s when I was fighting for historically black colleges, and how Al Sharpton came down to DC with his goons after we had organized 20,000 young black students. They were about to cut all black colleges. And I didn't believe them, honestly. I didn't believe him. Honestly, I really didn't. And it was only afterwards he asked me to come down and meet with him in Virginia. I did. We met for about 3 hours. And he basically told me, your problem is the Democrats. Not only is your problem in the Democrats, it's a particular group in the Democrats. You know, this is November, late October, November last year. I'm like, yeah, right. Not last year, 2011. I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, I'm a Democrat. What are you talking about? And so he said, you'll see. And your biggest problem is that you don't have any money. And they're going to try to destroy you. And it's going to be black people within the party defending a particular group that really wants these colleges. He said, you got 80% of it right. You're missing some things, but I can tell you're not going to stop. So I'm going to let you do your thing. And so I left, drove back up to Dover, and from that time period, the harassment and the attacks from me, from the so-called black administration at Delaware State University, which is really being ran by white middle management. The attacks were so severe that I ended up developing post-traumatic stress disorder because they were literally trying to kill me up there. I stopped going to my office. I had to have my office meetings in the open space. So as I get into this, I think there are some very important things that we need to look at first, some historical background. And as I stated earlier, this is not about me. It's because I became a mouthpiece for the group, because I refused to compromise my principles, because I refused to diverge from the teachings of Dr. John Henrik Clark, from the teachings of Martin Delany, from the teachings of Harriet Tubman, from the teachings of Malcolm X, from the teachings of Dr. King. I refused from the teachings of Amos Wilson. I refused to compromise those principles that made me a doctor. I refused that. I refused it. And I was taught that the information is for the people. It's not my information. I'm a product of the people. I come from the people. So it's my obligation as an intellectual to give the information back to the people. That's my obligation. It's not my obligation to take the information and hoard it and prostitute it to the highest bidder. No, it's to the people. So I wrote the article. And then I'll get into how we came about these lynchings. But some historical context. And I can't say this over enough. This is not an individual attack. Because when we understand the elite of the country and how they deal with us, they deal with things as strategic. They deal with us as who has the influence to bring about information. Dr. Clark, I was listening to a tape of John Henrik Clark the other day. He said, whenever someone historically has come and tried to show us the way, they were either killed, poisoned, ran into exile, or in prison. Those are your choices. And we can go all the way throughout. Then he starts talking about what happened to David Walker, how he was poisoned, who wrote The Colored People's Appeal, the appeal, who poisoned him. Then he went to Booker T. Washington, that a lot of people don't know. When Booker T. Washington started questioning the northern industrialist money, he mysteriously dies, right? He was young. We believe he was poisoned. It follows the historical trait. And we can go on. We can talk about what happened to Paul Robeson. They poisoned him. They were poisoning him for a while. They poisoned Malcolm and then eventually killed him. We tend to forget. I would tell my students when I was teaching, remember, they killed Malcolm in front of his wife and children. Shot him. His wife and children were there. And they wonder why the children are having so many problems. And the grandson, the government killed him. And then they killed this government, United States government. Then they killed Martin Luther King. Shot him in the head. Blew out his brains. This is the king. We don't talk about that. I went down with my children to the Washington Monument on the mall. I used to work there as a park ranger, so I'm very familiar with it. And we stood beside the king, and I said, the only thing that's missing is that bullet hole in his head with his brains pouring out, that the government killed him. And there was a trial, and the jury found the government guilty of killing Dr. King, and then put it on some marginalized, poor European American. But if we look at the traits, we still are wondering how our dear Khalid Muhammad died. He was poisoned. How did Amos Wilson die? Huh? Right before the blueprint for Black Power. Some of us have forgotten about that book, because had we not forgotten about it, we will be implementing it. We will look at that book because he gave us a blueprint on how to survive. We don't hear us talking about that book anymore. So it's important that I bring this up. These coordinated assassinations or assaults on our people. Carl Evans, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Carl Evans. He wrote a book on the assassination of Malcolm X. Do y'all remember when Malcolm was assassinated? February the 21st, 65. That's when he was killed. In Harlem. According to Evans, he was supposed to be in Indonesia to speak at an African-Asian non-alignment conference headed by the Indonesian government. Malcolm wasn't the only one targeted during that time period. We have to say this. We have to keep reminding our people that when leaders stand up and say things and use the skills that they were trained to do, we never protect them. Because if we protected them, they wouldn't be dead. So it's our fault as much as the government, because the government is going to keep doing it. That's what they do. But we forget because we have historical amnesia, because we don't control our history. So with Malcolm dying, being killed, assassinated in 65, right during the same period we have the overthrowing of Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, who's killed, who's toppled in 66. He also offered Malcolm political asylum. At the same time of Nkrumah, you had the Indian-born Kenyan citizen named Pio Pinto, who supported Malcolm. This is a Kenyan-born Indian from India, not the racist term Indian from America, right? But he was born in Kenya, but he was of Indian descent. He was assassinated. We had the Prime Minister of Burundi in 66, I believe, who was assassinated. And then right after that, we had the Prime Minister, the President Sukonda of Indonesia, who was overthrown. It's important that we constantly remind. Right at the same time, King is assassinated in 68. But what we don't talk about with King because King was a military strategist. He was in the process of launching the Poor People's Campaign. Y'all, anybody old enough to remember that? I was born in '68, you know. But I wasn't there, but as a historian, we studied this. The Poor People's Campaign, where he was planning on an assault against the United States federal government. He talked about this in an article called A Showdown for Nonviolence. He was about to shut down D.C., the Pentagon, because he was angry. Black people were becoming discontent with the war in Vietnam. And he was bringing in people from all over the country. We're bringing people this way, from New York, from Chicago, from Mississippi. They were talking about shutting down the government. Right before that Poor People's March, he's shot in the head. His head is blown open. But now the same people who say they love him, they love him, right? So we must understand the historical context. He was talking about saying that the government had to make substantial economic changes. He talked about reparations. He said, you can't talk about reparations without, and he talked about reparations without even mentioning slavery. This is Dr. King. He said, you just can't, you know, earlier in his speech in '63, he said that you cannot, black people got a bounce check. He was becoming more nationalistic with his rhetoric, right? He gets killed, right? So, as I said earlier, the assault on me, what I'm going through, is not individual. I wrote in September of 2011 how black colleges are turning white. And I was showing how it was the historically black college that created the black middle class. That's what created a Du Bois. And I know some of us don't like Du Bois because we don't understand Du Bois in comparison to Garvey, and I'm a Garvey scholar. I have a book coming out on Garvey. I have the first book-length manuscript on the Garvey movement in a particular state. I studied a state. And not only did I study a state, I studied the state where Queen Mother Moore was from, Louisiana. Because I wanted to know, I wanted to show the people how and why these people chose Garvey over the NAACP. Why? Why did Louisiana have more branches, UNIA or Garvey branches, than any other place in the world? More than 100 were right in Louisiana. Why? How? How could that be? Right? But it was the historically black college that created the Dr. King. It created Jesse Jackson. I know some of us may not feel talking about the Jesse back in the day. You know, Kwame Ture, Ezekwe, the first president of Nigeria, Kwame Ture, all of this. These black colleges doing this. Stokely Carmichael. Kwame Ture, right? Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah went to Lincoln, right up the road. These are cats are saying, okay, now for the first time we're going to take black nationalism, Pan-Africanism, and put it in a state. We're going to have state power. A Pan-Africanist, black nationalist state. Ghana was that. That was our state. All the people he had in Ghana. Maya Angelou went to Ghana. Everybody was going, that was the state. He was saying, no, we're gonna march troops into South Africa and kick all those white supremacists off. This is what they were doing. This was coming out of the black colleges now. This type of education, this type of training. In fact, up until very recently, most of all the Congressional Black Caucus leaders were coming out of the historically black colleges. Most, if not all, of the training for the civil rights movement, black colleges. The core element of the black power movement, black colleges. Y'all didn't know this. And so, when I wrote this article, I didn't understand. I thought I was just writing something to warn people on what was going on. I didn't realize that I pissed off a lot of powerful so-called white people in this country. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand at the time that historically black colleges are worth about the 105 that are left over $100 billion. We don't appreciate them, but other people do. I didn't understand that. I'm a product of that college. I am who I am because of these colleges. We had people there. My first time seeing Dr. Clark was at Southern University. I didn't know who Dr. Clark was. I was an undergraduate. I'm like, who's this black man sound like a Baptist preacher talking about our history? I was, you know, you hear Dr. Clark speak. I was in a trance. Hear that man speak. I was a social work major. I changed it to history because I heard Dr. Clark come to Southern University. I changed it. But the atmosphere, the instructors, the professors that created the atmosphere to bring a Dr. Clark, to bring a Dr. Ben, to bring Stokely Carmichael or Kwame Ture 3 times. I was able to see him when I was an undergrad at 2 different black colleges. I remember when I transferred from Southern to Texas Southern, he's like, I remember seeing you at that other college. It was the historically black colleges that created our ability to resist. Civil rights movement was started, the Montgomery boy bus cop, black colleges, Alabama A&M. It was the black colleges that did this. And now they are a threat to national security. They're a threat. The movement against colonialism in Africa, the black colleges. So I talk about this in my article. You can Google it, how black colleges are turning white. I didn't understand. So when I got to Delaware State University, which is a historically black college, which is the only state college in Delaware, I didn't understand how the white administration was constantly hampering me on my teaching skills. They would come to me and say, you're too black. I'm like, I'm at a black college. What are you talking about? This is our tradition. What do you mean I'm too? You're too white. How am I too black? If I'm too black, you're too white. Get out of my office. What are you talking about? I didn't understand it. I didn't understand at the time that there was a move to take the colleges. I had no idea. I had a little knowledge because at the previous university I was at in North Carolina, it was the same thing, but I didn't understand. At Delaware State, they were saying this is a white college. They were telling me, oh, this school is going to be like Bluefield State, West Virginia State. You ever heard of those schools? They're historically black colleges. But guess what? There ain't no black people there. And they're still getting millions of dollars. Yeah, these are historically black colleges without black people. And the government gives them millions of dollars for black people without any black people being there. They cleansed them. That's why I called the article the ethnic cleansing of HBCUs in the age of Obama. I used ethnic cleansing because that is a United Nations term. They're violating United Nations human rights, that we have a right to be educated according to the United Nations Charter in the way that we want to be educated. Every minority group in this world have that right. It's a God-given right. And I refuse to back down from that principle because that's what created me. That's how I became Dr. Issa. When I went to Howard to do my PhD, we had some haters there, black and white haters. But they didn't outweigh the black instructors who nurtured us to do the research that was needed for the people, right? They outnumbered those who were against us. So, with these black colleges, I started writing. I mean, they would tell me, hey, this is going to be a white college. I'm like, how can a black college be white? It just didn't. That's like a Jewish, Brandeis University being a black college. How could that be possible? Could Harvard become black? I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking, what is the rationale? But I didn't understand until I finished the article what was going on. When the article was released, September the 7th, 2011, the editors of the online journal, the Black Agenda Report, y'all familiar with that journal? The most consistent, powerful black journal that we have, the Black Agenda Report. They said that my article within 3 days was downloaded something like 10,000 times. I was like, really? I thought I was just doing the work, you know. I'm like, they said, yeah. After the third day, somebody hacked into the journal, shut it down for a week. They had never been shut down before. They were like, Jahi, what did you do? I said, I don't know. They sent a virus in and shut it down, encrypted, and attacked my article specifically. And this is what Tony Brown was telling me. He said, oh, they after you, buddy. I asked him for help. He didn't give me no help. So at Delaware State, we saw, my 4 years there, we saw a tremendous decrease of black faculty. I think now Delaware State's African-American faculty is less than 15%, with half of them being at retirement age. Now, people say, oh, that's just Delaware State. No, this is a move on all the colleges. Delaware State is the litmus test. Why? Why do you say that? Well, they got it now. They got somebody from Delaware who was in the White House. Most importantly, we have been totally neutralized with the last 2 elections to the extent that we don't know what's going on. We just happy. Where everything that we created over the last 100 and something years is being stripped. All the sacrifices that those who came before us is being taken right from us, but we happy. I'm not going to call any names because I know how we feel about certain people. Right? So, the students started complaining at Delaware State. This is going to come to all the, so if people watching this live, they need to understand that, yeah, it's coming to Morgan, it's coming to Bowie, it's at Howard, it's at Tennessee State University, it's happening all over the country. I'm the only one to do the research. I saw it. They're taking them. Not only are they taking the historically black colleges, right now the United States Supreme Court is deliberating on a decision they're about to make any day from now called Fisher versus the University of Texas. You probably never heard of that. That's where they're going to end affirmative action at all the colleges. What does that mean? You ain't going to be able to go to the white colleges either. Oh, that can't happen. We got a black president. No, you're wrong. Obama's going to stop it. This has been in plans for a while. But now they have the right type of people in place to do it. Very sinister. It's genocide. It's menticide. Fisher versus the University of Texas. So, 300,000 African Americans go to historically black colleges every year. Black students choose freely to go to historically black colleges when they can go to predominantly white colleges. They can go to Temple. They can go right now. They can go to NYC. They can go to University of Maryland. Penn State right now. My cousin's daughter's right at Penn State. She ain't gonna be able to go after next year. They're about to end that. They're going after the main arteries. So I wrote about this, and I was teaching my students this, and I was teaching them that they have a moral responsibility to attack it. Use your minds to attack it. Your mind, yeah, it's a dangerous thing. A black mind is dangerous when you're using it for your people, because I said the only reason why you're here because people made sacrifices for you. Of course, this didn't sit well with what I call the black necks. You know what a black neck is? It's like a white neck. Y'all heard of white neck, rednecks? We got black necks too, a lot of them. Racist black people, white supremacists. They're worse than the KKK. In fact, now we know. I used to work at the National Archives and Records Administration in DC for 3 years. I worked with the top African-American archivist in the country, Dr. Walter Hill. I was his assistant. We found out how Dr. King was killed. They couldn't have done it without the help of black people. There's even a video where Dick Gregory is showing how one of the ministers that was with Dr. King slips and says, I moved out the way so they can have a straight shot at him. Black people did this. Black people, we now know that Dr. King's photographer was on the payroll of the FBI. That famous photo of him, them pointing, that's Dr. King. He was paid to help kill Dr. King. He can't do it without us. Right? We know that Emmett Till, black people assisted in lynching him. We know that. It's a young man that did a serious documentary on it. Y'all heard of it? Yeah. Emmett Till, who was lynched. Some people say that his lynching and his mother's decision to show that on Open Casket, which appeared on Jet magazine, that was really the launching. Black people were fed up at that point. All right? So it's important that I say this. So on March the 1st, or actually February, someone in the community heard that I was about to start Delaware's only black newspaper. Now, this is deep. Listen to me. Delaware, 25% of all the people in the state of Delaware are black. Deep. Delaware has about 1 million citizens. The state is 90 miles long. But yet, not one black newspaper. Not one. They haven't had one in 30 years almost. So I said, well, sure, time to create a newspaper. I was telling everybody, yeah, we're going to have a newspaper, a black newspaper. So it got word in the community. Someone brings me this flyer and blows my world open. A flyer of a black man hanging from a tree. It's a digital photo. A black man hanging from a tree with a rope with a swastika on the flyer, and it said, cleaning our streets one nigger at a time. This is February 2012. Lady brought this to me on campus. I was like, what is this? She said, yeah, they put this all downtown. We heard that you support black people. Nobody else will help us. Help us. Oh, I mean, she said that. I was like, okay, cool, you know. I ain't got no fear. So I went down and I started investigating. Found out that the police went door to door, asking the community to give those flyers up. They, you know, black folks say, we ain't seen them. What flyer are you talking about? They tried to confiscate the flyers. And so I saw that this was real. And I said, these people are going to, either they're about to start lynching or they've been lynching. I didn't know. I was in the state for 3 years, so I didn't know much about the culture. And my life was at the university. I didn't know much about the culture in Delaware. I didn't know at that time that Delaware was the last state in the Union to abolish slavery. 1901. They rejected the 13th Amendment in 1865, February. They rejected the 14th Amendment in 1867. They rejected the 15th Amendment, 1868. 1901, they abolished slavery in Delaware. Up until recently, they had a whipping post right outside the court. Recently, I'm saying recently, I'm like the 80s. That's what I mean, recently, where they will whip black people in the public. This is the state of Delaware. This is the state of the Vice President of the United States. They're lynching our people, and they don't want us to be angry about it. When I saw that flyer, I was so angry because I knew that it could be me. I wasn't stupid. And I said, Lord, I don't want my son. I got 2 sons. What do I do? So I waited until the proper time to bring this to my students. I waited until I got to a particular history dealing with the origins of the civil rights movement, Emmett Till, and I brought the flyer out as a primary source in academia. As a primary, newspapers are considered primary source, right? Primary source. And I introduced it, and I started lecturing on lynchings. And the students, being young and adventurous, one student took the picture, the flyer, took it with their phone. It went viral within minutes. I didn't understand. I didn't even have a Google phone at that time. I didn't know what a Google phone was. I was like, how did everybody get this flyer? The next thing I know, the next day, the students were having a rally on campus asking the state to look into who put this flyer out because they were afraid. They were doing the thinking more than they took it further than I could ever think, but this is how I trained them. I was training them to think and to be responsible and to be active and to engage government and to practice democracy. This is how I was training the young people at Delaware State University. I didn't look at them like the non-African American faculty at Delaware State looked at them as animals, as inferior. This is what happens when black colleges turn white. So they decided that they were going to march from the Martin Luther King Student Center to the Board of Trustee meeting on March the 1st. I supported them. The white students had a similar march 1 year and a half prior with a white equestrian team. Can you imagine a black college with an equestrian team? Never heard of it, huh? That tells you it's not a black college. They had a march because they were going to get rid of the equestrian team. They said it cost too much money and it wasn't bringing in any money. All white, mostly white females, one African-American female. No one was arrested. I know, I was out there. Those equestrian team students, they were my students. They came to me first. Dr. Issa, do you think we should do it? I said, hey, if you feel strong about this, do it. That's your right. First Amendment. First, I taught you First Amendment. We read all the amendments up until the 18th Amendment. I said, yeah, do it. Would you support us? Sure, I'll come out there. I was out there. Police didn't harass. They rode their horses on campus. Their horses poo-pooed all over the campus. Called the president of the university all type of names. These are white females at a black college. I was like, whoa. Little did I know, a year and a half later, I would be engaged with black students. They didn't even allow the black students to move from the Dr. Martin Luther King Center. They arrested me, beat me up. I left on an ambulance, almost killed me, arrested me again in the hospital on my emergency bed, put me in jail, and threatened me with my life if I didn't sign documents. This is in Delaware. Then put me on administrative leave, and then eventually fired me. Fired me based on, of course I pleaded, I'm not guilty. I didn't do any of these things. I didn't touch no officer. I wasn't disorderly. And gradually the charges start dropping to where I'm faced with disorderly touching an officer and resisting arrest, which is 1 year each. I'm now left with 2 years in jail. But at first I caused a riot. I was disorderly. They were saying I was doing all type of unthinkable things. I didn't understand. I was like, why all of this aggression? I didn't understand that I had hit on two main arteries. One, the black colleges turning white. Two, lynchings. I decided I'm going to go to this park. I have nothing to do. I was like, wow, all the years I put into getting a PhD, my career is over with. At that time, I really didn't know that Beau Biden Jr., Joe Biden's son, was the Attorney General. I hadn't really looked at the documents. I didn't know much about law. So I started going to Silver Lake Park in Dover, Delaware. I would go twice a week to walk around the park, twice a day, just to clear my mind, get exercise. And then in the evenings, I would go with my children when they got out of school. May the 11th, well, May the 13th, no, May the 12th, my wife calls me and said they lynched somebody at that park. My wife is from West Africa. But she took several African-American history courses because her husband is a history professor. So I said, you got to learn about our experience in this country. Your children are going to have to go through this. So she took the course and she called me and said they lynched somebody at the park you were at, and I told you to be careful at that park. I didn't like that park. I told you there's something nasty about that park and you wouldn't listen to me. And I said, what are you talking about? There's nothing in the newspaper. I Googled it. She said, my white colleague told me they lynched somebody there. I said, lynch? And I started thinking about the flyer. I didn't know at the time this was my former barber. So I go to the barber shop where I didn't see nothing in the paper. I went to where the news in the community is. I went to the barber shop, my barber shop. I said, yeah, I heard about this. They were like, barber said, that's my cousin. He used to work right here. He cut your hair a few times. I said, are you serious? Who? I said, where's his family? I go by. I'm a member of the NAACP. I start investigating. Nobody in the community believed that this young man would walk during the daylight, hang himself with his own belt. Nobody believed it. In fact, they said this particular young man loved guns. And they said if he was going to kill himself, he was going to shoot himself because he loved guns. And so when I finished my investigation, I called the state NAACP chair and I told them. They said they weren't going to get involved. I called the Urban League, I called the SCLC, I called everybody, the Southern Poverty Center, I called everything you could think of. You know, I'm like, they are lynching people here. They lynched somebody. It was mind-boggling. So I noticed after I started becoming vocal about this, people started following me a lot. It was very noticeable. White men, wherever I went, they were there, following me, trailing me everywhere. And my wife, out of concern, said, you need to chill out. Just stay home and chill out. I said, okay. Some of the people that were working with me, we decided not to get involved because it was hard to get any support. 2 weeks later, I get a call from the family of the young man who was lynched, and they said, we now have evidence on who did this. Can you meet us at the park? We went there. As we pulled up in the park, a group of white trucks circled us, trying to intimidate us. And I told the group, I was myself, another professor, and 3 other people, look them in the eyes, because they're cowards. They're cowards. They only go after one of us. It takes 10 of them. They're not going to go after 6 or 7 of us. They're cowards. They're not going to do anything. Just look at them, stare them down. We didn't have our camera. I didn't have my phone. I would have took pictures of them. And The young lady that was with me, a local minister, she's on that War on the Horizon video. She said, I said, look, we got to do something. She said, I'm through. You're not from here. You don't know these people. They will kill all of us. They don't care, and we will get no help. And she started telling me the history of the killings of blacks in that region. And I said, if you don't do anything, they're going to come after your son. Oh, they ain't coming after my son, but I'm through. She left. This had to be June, July, August. 3 months later, this woman called me at 7 in the morning and said, they tried to lynch my godson. The same woman. Don't call me a prophet. You think this is a dream, huh? I'm telling y'all the truth. I'm not lying. And I thought she was joking. And my wife was like, don't go, it's a setup. They're trying to set you up. So later on that afternoon, I went and got my daughter from the bus stop, and we snuck over there because this is too good to be true. I couldn't believe it. And I met the young man. His name was Henry Fordham. Y'all saw him on the video? How many people saw the War on the Horizon video? All right, just a few. Well, we have some right here. And he told this graphic story of how they tried to cut off his penis, how they knocked him out. He only weighed like 115 pounds. How they tried to strangle him. He was just telling all these stories. And I asked him, I said, how old are you? He said, 32. I said, what's your level of education? He said, 6th grade. I said, then everything he's explaining to me is the rituals of a lynching. They tried to cut off his ear. He showed me the mark. What happened to him when he went to the hospital? How the police made mockery on him, the ambulance and the police. And I said, this was a lynch. I took a photo of the mark around his neck, the rope, the belt. He talks about it explicitly. After a week and a half, he started telling me that people were saying that they were going to kill him. So I said, and he said I needed to be careful. So I said, well, if they're going to kill us, then they're going to kill us in plain sight. I got some contacts of some real bad black men up in D.C. who ain't scared. So I asked them to come down and do the video. Those are the guys from War on the Horizon. And they came, and that's the video that you see on that website, but I have some copies here. Man, then we find out there was another young man found hanging from a tree at the local college. I went and investigated that. So we have 2 men hanging from trees. We talked to the family in New Jersey, and there was no thorough investigation at all. This is the state of Delaware, the vice president. This is right before the election. We call the FBI. We call the Department of Justice. We call everybody. We document this. We're writing people, ask them. Nobody would do anything. In fact, the Department of Justice straight up told me, that's the vice president of state. Ain't nobody going to touch this. Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, you name it. We tried everything because we were afraid that it was going to happen again. We even know the guys who did it. We know their names. We know where they lived. Of course, after the young man got away, they left that house, so we went and investigated that whole community. They said that these guys went around the community bragging that they were lynching black people, and they weren't going to stop. This is in Delaware. All the black leadership, no help. No help whatsoever. Nobody will help us. So this is where we are. I'm almost done. We talked to everybody that we could talk to about this. So we were really, really concerned about this. And that's when we decided to have a protest. After my hearing in December, we realized that the police that beat me up and arrested me, they admitted in court at our hearing that they admitted that they had no probable cause to arrest me. And the judge, without allowing us to bring forth our witnesses, ended the hearing. And it took him 2 months to make a ruling. We got the ruling back February the 1st, where he dropped the disorderly conduct, but it said that the reason why I was stopped by the police is not because I was disorderly, because they admitted that I wasn't disorderly, was because they had reasonable suspicion to believe that I was trespassing. At a black college, at work. I'm at work. Me and the black students were trespassing. So they're going to keep the resisting arrest because when he stopped me, I resisted and touched him. That's where we're at. So we're now waiting. We're writing the judge now, telling him we want our part of the hearing. You didn't let us bring our witnesses. We're ready to bring forth our witnesses. So we're not sure if there have been any more lynchings. We've heard stories that there have. I can't verify it. Doing this type of investigation, it's a lot of resources involved. And since they fired me, I don't have any resources, so I can't really go out and investigate it properly. But at every corner, every chance we get, we go into very political meetings and we start yelling like we're crazy, saying that they're lynching black people here in the state. They're lynching. What are you going to do? None of them. Can you imagine you go to black preachers and they look at you crazy? One preacher told us, he said, look, man, we're not getting involved. We know what's happening. Just be careful. This is Delaware. Remember, slavery ended in 1901 there. Never really ended. Delaware is also, as I end, Delaware is also has the largest rate of incarcerated African Americans in the world. The largest incarceration rate percentage-wise in the world. Percentage-wise. And the largest number percentage-wise, of course, in the United States. First is Delaware, the United States, then Russia. Home of the vice president. Home of the vice president. The state has always been controlled by the Democrats, the Dixiecrats. And so, what are the solutions? So, we were sitting down and talking a few months ago, and we said, well, one of the solutions should be that we should start our own black political party. I went up and talked to Alton Maddox. Yeah, I heard familiar with Attorney Alton Maddox. They started a freedom party up in New York. They got 50,000 people registered. They're going up for this next election. They're going to be competitive. 50,000 people. That's major. That ain't nothing small. Register. Who left the Democratic Party and joined the Freedom Party. So I said, well, we need to do this in Delaware. We need to do this all over the country. We need to start our own political parties with a pan-African agenda. So we started writing a platform, and we formed a political party, which we're now registering people now, called the Harriet Tubman Freedom Party. Harriet Tubman said, leave the plantation. Leave it. She said she would have freed more only if they knew they were slaves. All right? So we started that. And we have a serious platform on it. For those who are interested, they can contact me at jahissa65@gmail.com. That's jahissa65@gmail.com.